literature in the Bible, the various places in the Bible as biblical counselors. We don't want to just keep going to the same places, the epistles. So we learn how to go to the narrative literature of the Old Testament in our first hour. What we want to do tonight, this session, and then also again tomorrow, is to go to the Psalms. One of the most wonderful places to go for your own walk with the Lord and when you're ministering and counseling is the book of Psalms. The Psalms, of course, are poetry. The Psalms basically were Israel's worship manual. God, He doesn't give us new information in the Psalms as much as He shows us how to respond to the information we know about Him that He revealed in the Torah. And this is such a very helpful place to minister. So what I want to do is I want to just work through two specific Psalms that have been really important in my life, particularly the one we're looking at tonight. So if we turn to Psalm 13. Psalm 13. Let me begin with a word of prayer, and then do we need Claire to show you waiting?
Is she here?
Are people waiting for interpretation? Well, I'll pray and continue. Father, thank you for another opportunity to open your precious word together. Thank you for my brothers and sisters. Would you help them as they listen? Just encourage their hearts, strengthen them, their walk with you, and strengthen them so they can help other people. Help me to be clear, accurate with your word. In Jesus' name. Is she coming?
Yeah, she's coming.
Okay, all right. Hello. Thank you. So we're on Psalm 13 right now. Do we need to test the equipment? Is the equipment working okay for everyone? How many people are actually using the...
Sácame voy, Perdón. Y que me quiero.
Can you hear okay? Everything working? Okay. All right. Well, let me say this. You may not need this study tonight. You may not need this study this year. You may not need this study in this decade. But if you live long enough, you will need what you're about to hear tonight. And I know that there are people in your life that need what we're going to talk about. That is, how do you respond when you have pain that doesn't go away? I'm not talking about a little bit of pain. I mean the kind of pain that just keeps going on and on. And it's not that you don't pray, because you pray, but then when you stop praying, the pain is still there. So you pray again, and the pain is still there. And the next week, it's still there. And the next week, and the next month, and the next year. It's chronic. It doesn't go away. It could be physical pain. It could be relational pain. It could be ministry pain. The pain could be very different. And it really doesn't matter what kind of pain. But when you're in pain like that, it doesn't go away. What do you say to God? How do you pray? That's what we're going to talk about tonight in this session. Now, I always hesitate to talk about my own story because my own story isn't the point. I look at my story that I'm telling you right now as just a window to look through to see God's Word. So that's all that it is. I don't want you to leave thinking about my story. Everyone has a story. But the story that God is given me is that I've been battling migraine pain for 27 or 8 years now. And I have been to 5 neurologists and a whole bunch of other doctors, like 14 doctors over the years, and have tried all kinds of things. I'm always having people coming up to me saying, "Have you tried this?" I'll give you one funny example. A man in our church came up to see me about 3 years ago, and he said, "I found this little clipping out of a magazine my wife cut out 10 years ago. And she's in heaven with this widower." Says, "I found this." And I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's supposed to be a remedy for migraines." I said, "Well, okay." I looked at it, and it says you take alcohol and peppermint oil, and you mix them together. And I said, "Well," his name's Lou. I said, "Lou, it doesn't tell me what the ratio is. I don't know. Basically, it was an advertisement to buy a book that told you about this remedy." He said, "Well, you might try it." So the next weekend, I had a real bad migraine, and so my wife, Sherry, I said, "We need to get some," we already had the peppermint oil, we didn't have any alcohol, so you need to go get some alcohol. So she went to the liquor store, and she said, "I need the highest approved alcohol you can sell me." And he says, "I can't sell that to you. You have to have a plumber's license." I guess they use that to blow out pipes, to clean out pipes. So he says, she says, "What can you sell me?" And he says, "I have 152 proof vodka." She says, "I'll take a bottle." So she comes home with this bottle of vodka and this peppermint oil. And I took them, and I poured some in the cup, mixed it together, and I took it. You thought I was going to drink it. No, it was actually something you put on your head. So I took it and I put it on my head, and it burned so bad I forgot I had a head. For about 10 minutes. And when it stopped burning, it was still there. So anyway, I've tried a lot of things. Some of them are funny. Some of them are not funny. So I've spent when I get bad migraines, which is about 15 days a month is my average. I have migraine pain. Not all of them are this bad, but some are. And when I have really bad ones, I just have to go into a dark room, and that's where I am. In 2012, our church gave me a 3-month sabbatical break in the summer to get some rest and to get some help. I went to the Cleveland Clinic. We all thought, get away, get some medical attention, and you'll be able to come back and just serve as a pastor again. But 2 months into the 3-month break, I was worse than I was before I went on the break, because they were changing medicines, and I started really struggling with depression, because I thought, what good's a pastor that can't read? I can't use my computer. I don't want to talk to people. What good is a pastor that's living in dark rooms all the time? And I thought, I love being a pastor, so this is something I love to do, but I can't do that, at least the way I used to do it. And I thought, what is God up to? So after the break was over, I came to the church, and first thing I did was I had a meeting with my deacons and said, I'm not better. We thought I would be better. I'm not. I don't know what this means, but I'm still struggling with pain. Plus, I'm having trouble processing things because of medicine. And they were so encouraging. They said, as we talked, we realized what God wanted me to do was to minister with the pain, not without it. We kept thinking God will take it away and then I can minister. And God made it clear, I could take it away, but I don't want to take it away. I want to use this pain. I want to give you the strength. So I started asking the people to pray that God would give me strength to minister with my pain. I'm still okay if He ever wants to take it away, but with the pain. And I just started becoming very transparent with the church about what God was doing in my life. One of the first messages I preached in 2012, after I came back, was this message. And I called it How to Pray When the Pain Doesn't Go Away. Because I'm not the only one. Some of you are in the middle of pain that just doesn't go away also. And all of you know people like that. This psalm, Psalm 13, has saved my life. And that's not exaggerating. It's a psalm that is meant to help us to know what to say to God when you don't know what to say to Him. When you've already talked to Him and the situation isn't changing. Now, let me tell you one other story and then we'll look at it. I've shared this message other places too. I actually shared it with the group last year. Some of you may have already heard it. When I was in Romania last year doing biblical counseling training, they asked me to preach in one of the churches in Timișoara on a Sunday evening. And I thought, I'm just going to preach this message from Psalm 13. So I knew I was going to do that. So I was sitting in front of the church next to Pastor Peter and the pastoral staff. They were sitting there. And everyone was singing during the beginning of the service. And of course, I know very little Romanian. So while they're singing in Romanian, I had lots of time to pray. And so I was praying, Lord, would you do something in this service to show that you are at work? Do something you alone can take credit for. So after we finished singing, we sat down, and a little girl, about 9 or 10 years old, got up on the platform, and she started saying something in Romanian from church. So I leaned over and I said, what's she doing? And the translator said, oh, she memorized the scriptures, and she's quoting a passage. I said, oh, that's great. I said, what passage is she quoting? He listened, he said, it's Psalm 13. I said, Psalm 13 is the passage I'm going to preach from. Did she know that? He said, no, I didn't know that. I said, I think God's going to really use His Word tonight to do something special. I mean, He always does, but sometimes He makes it very clear. What little 9-year-old memorizes the passage that says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? That's Psalm 13. Well, God worked in that service in a wonderful way. If there's anything the Romanian brothers and sisters know about, it's suffering. And I looked into the eyes of those little grandmothers and grandfathers, and I just saw God use His Word to really encourage them. And so anyway, it's my privilege to just minister this to you as well now as we think about Psalm 13. Psalm 13 is a very simple psalm. As you see in your notes, it just has 3 points. It teaches us in verses 1 and 2 to bring our questions to God. Then it teaches us to bring our requests to God. And then it teaches us to bring our praise to God. Verses 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. It's very simple. It's easy to memorize. In fact, I hope you will memorize it if you haven't already. Because this is the kind of psalm that you want to have in your mind when you're going through difficult times. It's sort of like, you know when if you've ever broken a leg or something, you're doing physical therapy and you're holding onto the rail to learn how to walk again? That's the way this psalm works. You hold on to the verses like they're the rails so that you can learn how to walk through a difficult time. When you don't know what to say to God, this is what we must do. We must bring our questions to Him. If we don't bring our questions, we're not being honest. But if all we do is bring our questions, we're not honoring Him. So we bring our requests to Him. And then we bring our praise in that order. And we'll walk through this and we'll see that. So if someone would read Psalm 13, and then we'll look at it. If someone read the 6 verses for us. Okay.
Devi kurët më arrosë, slavë të shëndet për jetë, devi kurët më pësherë të gjënë tënë, devi kurët të marrë rendime në shpiriti, do të kemi fitorim në zemën time të rritin, devi kurët do të mjetë armiku i mbi mua. Shiko me vëmendje të përgjigjem o Zot, Perëndia ime. Ndriço sytë e mi, që të mos mësoj gjumin e gjumit e vdekjes. Dhe armiku të mos thotë, e munda, edhe armiqtë e mi, të mos gëzohen kur nuk mund. Por unë kam besim në mirësinë tënde, edhe zemra ime do ta zëvojë në shërimin tënd. Unë di këndoj Zotit, sepse ai më ka trajtuar me shumë shpirtësi.
Now, you'll notice in the heading, this is a Psalm of David. We don't know when he wrote this psalm. Maybe it was the time in his life when his father-in-law tried to murder him. You remember that? Saul tried to kill him. That's a pretty tough situation for a young man to go through. I could see that being when he wrote this. Maybe it was when he was in the middle of his life, like a 50-year-old man, when his own son Absalom turned the whole nation against him. That would cause him to write this. Maybe it was when one of his best friends, Ahithophel, betrayed him. If you ever had anyone very close to you betray you, that would make this happen. Maybe it's when the Ziphites betrayed him to King Saul and turned him over. They wanted to turn him over to Saul after he had helped them. That could have been the situation. Any of those situations could have produced the kind of mental agony that brought about this. But David doesn't tell us when. The Holy Spirit guided him to write this, and he doesn't tell us which situation. And I think it's intentional, because the purpose isn't for us to think what David went through. The purpose is to use what the Spirit gave David to help us. That's the purpose of the Psalms. The Psalms have been given to help people individually know what to say to God, and corporately in their worship to say to God. And they were designed to be sung. You see, this was for the director of music. That's why one of the things I've done with this is I put a little tune to it, and I sometimes sing this to the Lord. The Psalms are wonderful for that. We'll talk about that tomorrow when we look at another psalm. So let's just walk through it. First thing he does is he brings his questions to God. He asks at least 4 times, "How long, O Lord? How long? How long? How long?" Is it appropriate to ask God questions like those? Yes. The psalmist asked them. Now it's different to ask the questions this way, how long, as opposed to how long. There's a difference. He's asking reverently, how long? Now, when we feel overwhelmed, this is not natural for us. You'll see that point in your notes. When you're in pain that doesn't go away, what you tend to do is to turn away from God rather than to Him. Now, most people initially turn to God. So they're having problems, they turn to God, "Oh God, please help me." But if He doesn't help them, what do? Turn away from Him, and then they go on their own way, and they think, "I might as well go get a pill to make me feel better, get a bottle of something to make me feel better, because He's not helping me." So what we need to do is what David's doing here. Turn to God and keep bringing our questions to Him. There's another tendency, and that is to try and figure things out on our own. You know, God doesn't seem to be helping. People don't seem to be having any solutions. So we just start looking inside of ourselves. I'm not going to even open up to anybody now. I'm just going to trust myself. But of course, we're creatures. The Creator made us to need Him. And when we try to go through life, even difficult times without Him, it won't work. We have been created to be dependent upon Him. He wants us to bring our questions to Him. Now, when we feel overwhelmed, we need to do what David does right here. He turns to the Lord, not away from Him, and he comes to God with everything that he has, including his questions. He asks the Lord how long he would feel abandoned, first of all. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Now, answer this question. Had God really forgotten David? Had God really hidden his face from David? We know that's not true. But that's exactly how David felt. So if you feel that way, what are you going to do with God? Are you going to pretend like you don't feel that way? No, God wants us to be honest with Him about how we're feeling. God, I feel like you've forgotten me. I feel like you don't see what's happening in my life. David's showing us that it's good to bring these questions to the Lord, to be reverently honest with Him. He asked, secondly, the Lord how long this inner turmoil would last. See where he says there? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and every day have sorrow in my heart? Such vivid terms. Have you ever been in a wrestling match with your thoughts? You lay in bed and your mind is just wrestling with thoughts. That's how David felt. And it didn't go away. You know, today he felt that way, and tomorrow and the next, it kept going on. And then he asked the Lord how long his enemy would prevail. How long will my enemy triumph over me? Again, we don't know which enemy he's talking about. If I mention the name of David, almost the first thing that comes to most of our minds is the enemy that he defeated when he was a young man. The enemy of Goliath, right? He said it was a great thing for David to be able to look back and see what God did to Goliath. And it was. But it was also difficult. Think about this. When David had Goliath attacking him, he called on God and God helped him and he defeated Goliath. So David knows that God can overcome his enemies, right? So God, why aren't you doing that with this enemy? I saw you do it to Goliath. Why not this enemy? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? He's going through this season where God's not doing anything about this enemy in his life. At least it seems. Now, when you're working with counselees, and this is a wonderful psalm to help them come to grips with the pain in their life. And of course, we all need to do this as well. And the first thing we need to bring to God are our questions. David does not play games with God. To use the language of Hebrews 4:16, he comes boldly to the throne of grace. Come boldly to the throne of grace. Bring your questions to God. Reverently, but bring them. He can handle them. They're not too heavy for him. If you feel like this has been going on for a long time, it's okay to say, how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? But don't stop there. He moves from his questions to his requests. Verses 3 and 4, look on me. There's several petitions he brings to God. Look on me. Answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I've overcome him, and my foes will rejoice in my fall. Here's what he asked. He's real straightforward. He doesn't sugarcoat this. This isn't just church talk. He's really honest with God. Look on me. Answer. Give light to my eyes. This is what I need, God. Look and answer. Give me light. Literally, enlighten my eyes. In other words, Lord, help me to see what I'm missing. That's a very important request when you're going through difficult pain. Because our perspective is so limited, isn't it? We only see what's right in front of us. Help me to see what I'm missing here, God. Tim Keller wrote a really good book on prayer that I've been listening, since I can't read as much with my eyes, I've been listening to audiobooks, and I've been listening to this audiobook by Tim Keller. This wonderful statement on prayer. I love this. He says this: God always answers our prayers. He either gives us what we're asking or what we would have asked if we knew everything he knows. God always answers our prayers. He either gives us what we're asking or what we would have asked if we knew everything he knows. Just think about that. sometimes God, as a father, like us with our children, says, I'm not going to give you what you're asking because I have something so much bigger and better. And this isn't going to be part of that. So God says no sometimes. Like, please take the pain away. And God's like, I could, but right now I'm going to give you the strength to endure the pain because I'm doing something in your life and through your life that will bring me glory and will help other people. And so God, He always answers our prayers, sometimes giving us what we ask, sometimes giving us what we would have asked if we knew everything He knows. But David is asking things here. And he even explains why he asked. He mentions 2 reasons for being so bold. Reason number 1, look on me and answer, O Lord my God, give light to my eyes. Here it is. Or I will sleep in death. In other words, I'm asking you to do this, Lord, because I'm afraid I'm going to die. Have you ever been in that situation where your pain was so great that you thought you were going to die from it? I'm hurting so bad, I'm not sure I can keep going. If you don't help me right now, Lord, I think I'm going to sleep the sleep of death. I've really appreciated reading biographies of other people who've been through difficult things. Charles Spurgeon, a great preacher from London 150 years ago, he battled all kinds of afflictions. He had severe physical problems. He had gout and other things that he dealt with. He struggled with depression. This quote has helped me a lot. He says this is his own words. When I was racked some months ago with pain to an extreme degree, so that I could no longer bear it without crying out, I asked everybody to leave the room and leave me alone. And then I had nothing I could say to God but this. Here's what he said to God. You are my Father, and I am your child. And you, as a father, are tender and full of mercy. I could not bear to see my child suffer as you're making me suffer. And if I saw him tormented as I am now, I would do what I could to help him and put my arms under him to sustain him. Will you hide your face from me, my Father? Will you lay a heavy hand on me and not give me a smile from your countenance? And Spurgeon says, so I pleaded, and I venture to say when I was quiet, and they came back who watched me, I said, I will never have such pain again from this moment, for God has heard my prayer. I bless God that ease came and the racking pain never returned. I've had that happen 3 or 4 times in my battle. I'm often crying out, Lord, help me to endure this in a way that will honor you. Sometimes it just gives me the strength to go through the night. Sometimes, like, Lord, I don't think I'm going to make it. If I saw my child in this situation, I would do it. And I remember one time the Lord just touched my body and caused the pain to leave that night. And He didn't speak to me audibly, but He made it very clear to me. He said, is it worth it to you? If this is what it takes so that you can know me, is this worth it to you? And I remember I was just weeping there, laying on the floor, saying, Lord, I want to say yes. Help me, because I don't always think that way. So sometimes He can take the pain away. Sometimes He doesn't. But Spurgeon learned to bring his request to God, like David's doing. And then he gives the second reason. David gives a second reason why he's so honest with God in these requests. When he says, look on me and answer, you see there in verse 4, and he says, my enemy will say I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. In other words, I'm afraid what the enemy will say about me and you if that happens. If I die in this pain, what are they going to say? What's my enemy going to say about you, God? What's he going to say about me and about you? See, that's the most important thing for us as followers of Jesus. What happens to us tells the world about him. And David's not being selfish here. He knows that he's God's anointed. And people are looking at him and learning what God is like. And so he's saying, Lord, if you don't help me in this situation, people are going to think that you're weak or that you don't care. And so he brings his request to God. Now, this is important for us. So when we're hurting and suffering and pain doesn't go away, we need to bring our questions to God. But don't stop there. We need to bring our request to God. What specifically do we need from our perspective, recognizing we don't see the whole situation? But don't stop there. If all we do is stop there, then we've not responded in the way God wants and the way His Spirit delights in enabling us to respond. That's number 3. Finish by bringing your praise to God. I love what happens in verses 5 and 6. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for He has been good to me. Did you notice how David's tone changed? When he began the psalm, he was really, really hurting. But now, he's praising God. It's like he's a different person. He ends by affirming the truth regarding God. He's looking up. He's not looking at his pain now. What captivates him is God. He's focusing on God's attributes. He's focusing on God's unfailing love, on God's salvation, on God's goodness. So he's affirming the truth of who God is. He uses one of the most important attributes of God in the Old Testament. The Hebrew word is chesed. Chesed. There is no one English word, or Albanian, I'm pretty sure, the word that captures chesed. You have to take love and mercy and faithfulness and persistence and covenant loyalty and put all that together to understand what this one attribute of God means, God's chesed. He says it's translated unfailing love in English. The King James says mercy. The English Standard Version says steadfast love. It's a wonderful word that describes a love that is steadfast based on a prior relationship. So it's a love that doesn't go away because it's based on a prior relationship. I think I can illustrate it for you. When I first preached this message back in 2012, I was out. I like to jog in the morning for exercise, or I don't go as far anymore, but I used to. Anyway, I jog in the mornings. And I was out jogging, and I was almost back home, and I came up. There was a stop sign with a little hole in the ground. It was, about this deep. And I looked down, and there was this ugly dog. I mean, a mean-looking dog. It was real mangy-looking. Its hair was all matted. And I jumped back, and I thought, I don't even want to get close to that dog. I thought it might bite me. So I ran on home and got cleaned up. Well, later that evening, a car went driving by our house, and a guy had his window rolled down, and he's yelling out, "I lost my dog! I lost my dog!" So I went out, and I said, "I saw a dog on the other side of the block this morning." I said it was laying in the water in this hole. He says, "That's my dog." He says, "My dog loves the water. He's an old dog. He can't hear very well. I was trying to wash him, and he ran away. And that's my dog." I felt like saying to the guy, "He sure didn't look like much to me. He was a pretty ugly dog." But this guy, he loved that dog. Well, that's this word right here. A prior relationship that means that there's now a loyalty to. I mean, he's loyal to this dog because he's got a relationship with him. That's what chesed means. The end of that story was he did get his dog back, and it was a happy ending. But this is what God has established a relationship with us. And this is what David is praising God for when he says, "But I trust in your chesed." God, you loved me, and you came and you saved me, and you anointed me to be Israel's king, and you have a relationship with me. So I don't understand what's happening right now, but I praise you because I know you haven't changed. See what he's doing? So he affirms this truth regarding who God is. Then he affirms the truth about what God does, that he's a saving God. He says, my heart rejoices in your salvation. There's a couple ways you can take this. I think Denise and I were talking about this last year when I gave this message over in Portia, that this could be past tense, that God's a saving God. So God, I praise you because you saved me in the past from my sin. That may be what David's thinking about. Or it could be that he's anticipating that God's going to save him from this situation in the future. I think either way is right. He's praising God because God is a saving God, and his heart rejoices in that. I mean, think in your own life. I think about in my life, when I was 11 years old, God did something amazing. God caused my dad to have to leave the job that he had and go get a different job. And he used the change in the state of Ohio where we live, where they changed the regulations for being a high school administrator, which meant my dad had to go get a different job, which meant we left. We were going to a church that was not a good church. It did not preach the gospel. And we moved to another city where my mother picked this church because she liked the steeple on top of the building. That's how they were not even thinking about it from God's perspective. But that was a place that taught the Bible and taught the gospel. God moved us there so that I could hear the gospel. And God saved me. And God also brought my wife, who's now my wife, her family moved into that same town about the same time, because she knew that I would be the godly wife someday, and God worked all that out. See, this is how God works in our lives. He moves, he saves us, he directs. And this is what David is thinking about. God, you're in control. You've helped me in the past, and I rejoice in that. So he affirms the truth, number 3, about what God has done in the past. You have been good to me. When you're in pain, you're tempted to feel like you're getting a bad deal out of life. That's not true, says David. No, you have been good to me. I may not understand what you're doing now, Lord, but I choose right now to interpret my pain in the light of your goodness to me. This has been a truth that's helped so many people. I was listening to this story told by John MacArthur about one of the great Scottish Covenanters, Richard Cameron. Richard Cameron was a great preacher 300 years ago in Scotland. And as you may recall, the Roman Catholic Church tried to force the Protestant preachers like Richard Cameron to become Catholic. And he resisted that, and he fought so that he could keep preaching the gospel. Well, the Catholics really heated up the pressure against Richard Cameron and the others, and they started killing many of them. And mostly Scottish blood was shed. And one of the most famous of these preachers was a man named Richard Cameron. One day, Richard Cameron was at his house where he was in hiding for his safety when a messenger came to him and brought a box. And he opened the box, and inside the box were 2 hands. And they were the hands of his son, who was also a gospel preacher. And he made a comment about those were his own son's hands, and he recognized them. And soon after came another box, and opened up, it was his son's head. All because they were not willing to do what the Catholic Church was trying to force them to do. Now, here's what he said in that moment, and the historians have written this down. This was Richard Cameron's response when he opened that up. He said this: "It is the Lord's will, and good is the will of the Lord. He has never wronged me." End quote. It is the Lord's will, and good is the will of the Lord. He has never wronged me. See, when terrible things happen to us, we want to think the worst about God. God, Where were you? Why didn't you? And Richard Cameron knew that God is wise and good and sovereign, and his first thought was, he's never done me wrong before. Why would I think he's doing that now? Now, I'm sure he felt great pain in the loss of his son, but he's doing what David is doing here. David is bringing his questions to God, and then his requests to God, and then he brings his praise to God. And he actually ends with action verbs. This is so important. Notice the end of the psalm again. When you're in persistent pain, after a while, it starts to wear on you, and even wear you down. You cannot afford to be passive and just take it. You've got to do something God-pleasing like David did. And specifically, in this final part of the psalm, he does three things. First of all, he verbalizes, I trust. He doesn't just think it. He says it. I trust in your unfailing love. A moment ago, he's asking the Lord, how long? Now he's saying, I trust you. He's saying those words. That's important. I trust you. Secondly, he verbalizes these words. My heart rejoices. My heart rejoices in your salvation. Is it possible to rejoice when your body's in pain? When your most cherished earthly relationship has gone sour? When you can't see how life is going to get any better? Can you rejoice then? David did. David shows us this is how God's Spirit will help us to respond. Because there was something more important to David than his health, than his family, than his job, than his position as king. There was something more important, and what was more important is something that he had not lost, and that is his God. I rejoice in you and in your salvation, he says. You saved me. I used to be your enemy, God, but you saved me, and I rejoice in you. But one of the things that's helped me so much when I'm going through my battles with pain is to listen to music that focuses on the truths about God. Wonderful hymns that express things like God's faithfulness and God's love. Not so much songs that talk about experience as much as songs that talk about God and what He's like in His salvation. What He did on the cross particularly. When I'm thinking about what Jesus endured on the cross, it just gives me strength. And enables me to do what David does. Thirdly, he announces, I will sing. This is the climax of the psalm. I will sing to the Lord, for He has been good to me. Can a person actually do that when they're in pain? Sing? David did. Is he out of his mind? Has he snapped? No, he's bringing his swirling mind back into submission to truth right now. He began by sharing how he was feeling. His head was sort of spinning in the clouds as he brought his questions to God. And then he brought his requests to God. But now his feet are back on earth and he's bringing his praise to God. And he's singing to God. It's really hard to keep moping in despair when you're singing about the goodness of your God. It's hard to keep rehearsing your list of complaints when you're expressing